They're gentle giants, so don't be shy.
Check Into Cash, now celebrating 20 years, is proud to present the beautiful Clydesdale horses. Visit cashdales.com for the upcoming schedule and more information.
Check Into Cash, they're on their way. The mighty Clydesdales will make your day.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Woo FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
All right, we're back here live in the studio, and I've got some politicians here, local politicians in the studio with me this morning, so I think I'll talk about dog control, animal control.
Cat control.
Huh?
Cat, dog, and cat.
Cat and dog control.
Yeah, it's technically not animal control. It's just dog and cat control.
Now then, I heard some conversation about this has been put to bed for 6 months.
At what cost?
Well, the cost was $120,000 for 6 months, $20,000 a month. When we reverted back to exactly what we had ending through June the 30th, we went back to exactly what we had in the last fiscal year. But it wasn't the same cost,
was it? How much would we have spent if we had just kept the contract in place?
Well, the option 2 that we voted on was just slightly under $300,000 for a year.
How much were we paying last year?
360, 320, 360, something.
More than that.
Yeah.
Well,
which may or may not be too much. I don't know. I think. Now
y'all put this out for bid, am I right?
It's gone out for what they call it, request for professional services to offer a bid and what you'll do, and the county mayor's office has run a legal ad in the paper to advertise for.
And you had 2 bids.
Well, we don't have. They're due in tomorrow. The bids are due by tomorrow. It's our understanding that 2 different organizations are going to offer some kind of proposal.
How long has the bid been let out for? Do you know? My problem with the government, when they bid something, they put it in a little bitty script in the newspaper, buried in something.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm telling you, nobody sees it.
Yeah.
Except the person that got the quiet phone call telling them to
except
bid.
the person who got the phone call who got a friend that's on the council or something.
Well, based on the attention,
you need to put an ad, you need to bid on this.
The attention around this issue, though, has had that kind of front and center. I mean, it's run with some front page articles on this, that the county was looking for options.
How many other
proposals.
Counties in the state provide animal control?
I think there's only one other one.
I remember Louis did some research on it, our commission chairman, and I think he said there's, if I remember correctly, about 43 who have no animal control services. That's
there's 90 counties in Tennessee.
So that's half.
About half of them have it, and about half don't. So,
well, and I know that there was a lot of discussion over the quote-unquote crisis of animal control, but our contract ended June 30th. And representing the 4th District, I've got arguably a fourth of the people affected by that contract going away. Everybody in the city continued to have animal control. I received one phone call, and that phone call was just in general of support of the animal control contract during that window of time. And that was with people being actively lobbied to call and support. I received 22 inquiries noting and appreciating the fact that we were looking at the budget and that when the numbers came out that it appeared to be a very costly service.
Well,
that doesn't seem to influence when we go to vote on things.
Here's one of my big problems with the way the county government is run in general. You said that contract expired June 30th, correct?
Correct.
When did you all start talking about it?
The contract?
About what you were going to do.
Back in February.
Oh, yeah. Real early.
When was the decision made?
Well, we had made the original decision to do something new. What we ran into is when it came time for the contract renewal, those of us, and Mr. Morlock and I are both on the finance committee, the county had never asked for audited numbers. on what the service was actually supplying.
Why would we need an audited number of anything? Because we win budget awards every year. We don't need to audit anything.
We never asked for audited numbers, so we did. We asked for audited numbers. When we finally got those audited numbers from the city, it spoke to what was your return on that investment for that service? What are you actually getting? And then we had to make a decision. We negotiated some options with the city. Those went to vote back and forth between the governments. The majority of the county commission was in favor of supporting the animal shelter, so we had a place for animals to land when they needed to. But as far as the pickup service, it didn't seem to make a lot of monetary sense. And then that's when it got to where we could not. It was kind of an all or nothing thing with the city. Either you'll fund us in its entirety,
then why not stick
or we
with
don't.
that decision?
The all or nothing.
When you decided to go with nothing, why not stick with it?
I think Mr. Morlock could speak more positively to this. He was pretty heavily involved with the lobbyists that
you will
wanted
find
action.
that our county commission, if you got 10 or 12 people who come to a county commission and 10 phone calls reverts into everybody in my district. As I told,
you tell me 10 phone calls will sway the commission.
I was in favor of it from day one for what we did last year. So, and my position was, and the three of us that initially voted to continue on with the city back in, when did we vote on that, Adam? In
That
May?
would have been back in May, yes.
So the decision was made probably in May. And my position was, and the other two that voted for it, let's renew this contract for a year. Let's review it. Let's see if we can do something else to save money. Let's look for a better option. And that was voted down. And the animal control people, or friends of animals, whatever you want to call them, which I'm
Pals.
I'm one
so
of them.
if you're against collection of the animals, then you hate animals and probably want to kill them and torture them.
But anyway, they raised quite a bit of commotion, and it was brought back up by both the city and the county, and we reinstated it as it was for 6 months at a lower price.
How does this, Jeff, fit into? I know that there was a lot of publicity a few months ago about us being a no-kill animal shelter. And aren't there a lot of regulations involved with that?
It's something that I don't understand, and I've told these people I'm going to try to get involved in this more as it goes on. There seems to be two opposing groups. You got one set of animal friends over here who are opposed to the no-kill, and I don't understand what's going on. I want to try to better understand what's going on.
They're not mutual animal friends.
I was just getting to the point of thinking that, when we get to spending this much time talking about animals control and some of these type of things, I really think it's a waste of our time, of our commissioners' time, to sit here and debate about these dogs and cats like this, and spending all this time when we've got issues of roads and some things that are meaningful.
The same thing, Steve, and I'm sure I'll make some people mad. Look, I love animals. I've had pets my whole life, all kinds of pets. But Adam, for example, has talked on the commission about zero-based budgeting, looking at the budget every year and determining priorities and seeing what's important. We're discussing about the cost of SRO officers in our schools so that when some crazy gunman comes in, we have someone there to protect our kids. And yet we're able to generate enough outrage to spend $300,000 a year to pick up animals. Now, I'm not saying that's not important, but you can't look at these things in a vacuum and say, well, yeah, we want to do this. Guess what, folks? We want to do everything, but we can't afford to do everything, and we ought to be trying to prioritize, which, again, I'll fall back to what Adam said about zero-based budgeting. The idea that we don't look at our budget every year and establish priorities is ridiculous.
We, on the animal control issue, obviously, and I was pretty clear with what I thought should take place back in the spring. I wanted to fund the animal shelter. We had a vested interest in that animal shelter. It's serving what it needs to do. Well, so we offered up to them the portion of what it would be to run that facility. What we wanted to do away with was the county pickup. And I'd hoped that we had looked at catalyzing a greater presence of the Humane Society in our town, which is a private nonprofit of people who are passionate about that issue. And what we know is that when nonprofits are full of people who are passionate about the issue come in and privatize a service like that, they do it more efficiently and effectively than anybody else. And to the animal rights folks, I constantly said, if I tell you it costs us $130 for animal control to respond, for each response in the county, would your entity do that for $40? Well, yeah, we could respond a lot cheaper than that. Then why wouldn't you allow us to pursue a method of doing that?
Why don't we look at outsourcing a lot more things than we're currently doing? I mean, let's talk about this animal shelter.
Because change is lost and people object.
To me, I think you need to look at the bid process you put this on. You need to give it enough time and enough advertisement to get some good qualified bids in. I think there's a lot of these kennels out there, pals and gals and everything else.
Dixie
Day Spades and all this stuff. If they could get the money to put into their business and still be able to provide this service, that they'd be all over it.
I think that's exactly what we're going to try to do.
Well, here's what I'd do. I would give it a good bid. I'd advertise it well. I'd make sure that I got some qualified, some solid, good bids. I'd let the bid and forget about it.
I think that's exactly what we're shooting to do.
Quit talking about it.
And but in the meantime, we voted to leave it like it was for 6 months, which is a temporary fix.
Well, I've got a question, Adam. What's going on with the city has invested in buildings, employees, and all this stuff, and now the county's not involved with it. What has the city done about their animal shelter?
The shelter's still running, but they had to relocate some staff into other departments that were previously involved with animal control. That's my understanding.
Now they've moved them back.
Yeah.
Back to where?
Back to animal control. Since we renewed this contract for 6 months, they moved. That's what Janice said she was going to do, was move. They moved 2 of them over to Public Works. Now they're going to move them back to animal control since the contract's been renewed for 6 months.
And I'll say I'm at a complete loss on why, by a vote of 11-3, we passed on the county commission to fund the animal shelter. It goes to the city council, and it was one of those 4-3 splits. You had 3 city councilmen willing to accept that investment. You were 1 vote away on the city council from having your animal shelter funded, and I still don't know why they wouldn't take that funding. But it was funny. We in the county commission, we had all the friends of animals. I think that's going to stick, Jeff. The friends of animals at all of our meetings, which they were going to have to sway all of these votes. All they had to sway was 1 individual on the city council, and that shelter would have been funded. But none of them ever showed up to the city council at that point. I think they've subsequently showed up.
But let me fall back to what I'm saying. You all are all talking about this with the assumption that this is the top of the priority list, and I'm not saying it's not, before all the animal people get mad at me. I'm just saying that this assumes that we have the money to do all of these things. Mm-hmm. We ought to be looking at all of our needs and saying what's the most important. I will say this, too. I found it interesting. The county mayor was quoted as saying that in most cases he believes that private enterprises can provide this service better than the government. Well, I'm wondering where that was when we were talking about a fire department.
All right, now.
All right.
What do you think about Volkswagen and UAW right now?
Looks like Corker's
I agree with
made
Corker.
That his baby, isn't he? Saying that it would be, what was the word he
said
used?
It would make them into a laughing stock.
Incomprehensible.
Yeah, laughing stock was the one I was looking at, that would make them a laughing stock. I think that's kind of counterintuitive to what has been the backbone of the success we've seen in economic growth in Tennessee, and it's a step in a direction that I think in other states we've just seen it fail miserably. So regardless of how you feel about it ideologically or anything like that, just say every case study we have nationwide says that model of economy in a large industry just doesn't work.
Well, did you read the whole story? Corker says that he has direct information that was pushed upon the company by one board member in Germany who is a member of the German union sect, however their unions work over there, and that he pushed that, and it made a lot of dissension inside the company, especially the American executives were very upset about that and apparently were forced to sign on to that letter.
Well, the way I look at it, if Volkswagen wanted their union, they should have gone to Detroit and they'd gotten a much better deal on property and buildings.
Yeah, but they'd have been competing with so many other unions.
Well, I know it, but there wouldn't have been a problem. That's where the unions were. Right?
Unions have their place in this country.
Had.
Probably because because our middle class in this country is so strong, a lot of that has to do with unions. Now, I'm not a big union fan at all, but it's just human nature. In a worst case scenario, you've got the management over here saying, I'm going to work these people as cheap as I can get them. If I can hire them for $5 an hour, I'm going to do it. I'm going to work as cheap as I can get them. On the other hand, over here, you got these union people that say, we make plenty of money doing what we do, but we want a big raise. So you got...
Jeff, you say they help the middle class. Would somebody move into the middle class without a job first? Can you have the union move you into middle class if you don't have a job?
I am not pro-union. I'm pro trying to do what's best for everybody, and that includes management and workers. But
most of the things the union brought to the forefront, and they did do some good things for us, are now completely covered by the federal government. Now, I'm not sure that's a good trade-off. I don't like powering the federal government.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
But there's really not much use for the unions anymore, and what's been really kind of neat is to see them get behind Obamacare, push Obamacare, and then figure out, oh, crap, the only reason people are joining the union now is our benefits that we provide, and now the government's going to provide those benefits. And we're going to lose members. So now what they were for, they're against.
Well, I think something that both Mr. Morlock and John have both hit on with unions, the unions to a great degree historically have been responsible for their own demise. And that's because at some point the mission and purpose of the union became secondary to the survival of the union. And what you have is an entity that starts to employ people full-time, and it becomes an employer.
Right.
And you have people who have to keep their jobs, preserve their jobs. They're the mouthpiece for the union, and their real purpose is not necessarily for the betterment of working conditions, but it's the survival of the entity itself. We know that organization, the UAW and the TEA and things like that, take on a life of their own, and they fight for their survival. So let's say you started a union to better working conditions, and all employers in that field said, you know what, we agree, we're going to better working conditions. That those union people don't get together and say, our purpose has been achieved, dissolve the union. They continue to find there's always another reason to fight. There's always another reason to survive.
The proof behind the union comes from Detroit. Just look at it. Right, John?
Well, that and the fact that they actually don't provide very good benefits to their own employees. Yeah. They actually ask for waivers out of Obamacare. They're pushing Obamacare on everyone else, and they ask for waivers out of their own Obamacare. Michael Moore is an excellent example. One of his first big salvos into notoriety was his movie on GM.
Right.
Guess where he makes his movies? He makes them in Canada with non-union employees.
Yeah.
Guess who owns stock in most of the companies that he was criticizing? Michael Moore. So they talk a good game, but they really have their interest at heart.
Well, and unions have gradually lost membership and credibility because of the very things that have been noted. But when you get into the business of the spirit of unionizing 30, 40 years ago, and I've got a lot of friends who are very pro-union, but historically pro-union, not current union, was voluntary participation in a group of people. And when you get into the position where you start trying to find ways to coerce and force people into paying your dues for your survival.
Right-to-work states.
That's right. Then I think people resent that. The working public resents that, and that eventually leads to your demise. So all that to say, here in Tennessee, I don't know why you would invite a model that doesn't work and is very unhealthy and creates dissension and only creates a beast that fights for its own survival and not what it's set out to do. I don't know why you would invite that into your yard.
I don't know either. I think Volkswagen's really got things kind of screwed up down there. I think we've been really proud of them, and I hope they don't mess this up. What else is going on around the city and the county you guys would like to talk about?
We can talk about one big issue that we've just, I don't know if we put it to bed or not, is the construction of Lake Forest. And the commission initially voted to fund it in 16 to 17 and first payment due in 17 to 18, and we voted with 8 votes to move it back 1 year and borrow the money in 15, 16 and have the first payment due in 17 to 18. And
will that payment include principal or just interest?
It's both.
So unlike Parkview, we're going to actually pay principal and interest?
Correct.
Okay.
And one of the areas of discussion was are we going to have enough money to do this? And one of the areas of discussion was moving some money out of the general fund balance over into debt service fund balance. And as Mr. Lowe has been saying, that priorities, we can't do everything, and how important is building the fund balance up is very important, I think. But
we shouldn't have drained it down in the first place.
But anyway, that's an issue that could be overridden by a future commission, but I hope it's not. I hope we've taken that as a commitment that we're going to do this when we say we're going to do it, and I hope we borrow the money early in 15 to 16, which means construction could start 2 years from now. Construction could actually start on the building.
Well, and John's hit something on the head. Since Mr. Morlock and I have been elected to the commission, for the first time in recent history, we've had to work with a stagnant budget with very little growth. And so the decisions have been tougher for 4 years. We've not had a big groundswell of revenue to go spending on things, so we've had to kind of deal with that. You couple that with the fact that we've had to deal with some very poor financial decisions and even construction decisions. I was quoted in the paper on Lake Forest talking about how horrible of a facility design it is. And most people agree, particularly those who've had to work there.
Well,
so we're dealing with consequences of bad decisions, and anytime you're batting cleanup a little bit, it's always going to be troublesome. There's not going to be an easy answer to get it done.
Does the new design, do either of y'all know, will it include duck blinds?
So, well, I think they could open that as a program.
The natural lay of the land as much as possible. So I think duck blinds would be actually a cost-effective thing to include into the design.
We're going to give all the children that go to school down there rubber boots to wear on rainy days.
All right, there's several things we could talk about. Of course, we're running out of time.
Can I say one thing before we quit? I'd like to thank John and his wife for their participation in community activities. John does a great job as chairman of their nursing home board. I know they have a lot of challenges out there, and I appreciate what he does, and also appreciate what his wife Lisa does on our HCI board. So she was recently renominated to serve on that board again. I wasn't sure she wanted to, but she said she did. So she was renominated, so I want to say how much we appreciate these folks for serving their community, and thank you.
On that same note, I'd like to say thank you to Doe for bringing donuts this morning, and your contribution to this panel. And its sugary rush.
Well, I thought you guys might need a little something sweet this morning to eat, so we had donuts in here.
Now, have anybody heard whether Franklin has survived Mount Kilimanjaro?
I haven't heard anything from Franklin. I asked him to text me some pictures and do some things. I hadn't heard a word.
I hope the Yeti hadn't drug him off into an ice cave.
He's my neighbor now. He moved in, and last thing he wanted me to do was collect his mail and his newspapers. And I can tell you, I notice he does not get a banner. So we can start taking up some banner issues with him, John, and getting him going a little more. He likes the time, so he gets plenty of time. So anyway, I thought I might take his newspapers and just go ahead and cut out the articles I wanted him to read and save those for him. But anyway, he should be back this weekend sometime, I think, and he'll be back in the studio next week. Before we leave, I want to say that today is 9/11. And
anniversary of Benghazi as well, which no one's been brought to justice. No one has been arrested. Nothing has happened.
Yeah. Anyway, Lisa Guerin, our director here at the Whoop Studios, came up with a nice tribute to our 9/11 that'll be playing several times during the day. I know that it'll be playing at 9 a.m., I think, this morning, and again at noon, and then again at 6 p.m. So anyway, keep your thoughts and your hearts with everyone that was involved in 9/11 and also in Benghazi. And thank God that we live in America. See you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson, John Stanberry,